There is a house on the east side of Defiance, Ohio, that has been empty for 23 years. The neighbors on either side of it mow right up to the property line and no further. They do not hang their laundry near its fence. They do not let their children play on the sidewalk in front of it after dark. They have an understanding with that house that does not need to be spoken aloud. People who have lived in Defiance long enough know what happened there. People who have not are told eventually. What happened began with a set of twins. Marcy and Ellen Duvall were born in February 1971 in the back bedroom of that house because a blizzard made it impossible to reach the hospital in time. Their mother, Donna, always said that was how she knew they were different. Most children arrive in the brightness of a hospital. These two came into the world in the dark, in the middle of a storm, in a house that had been in the family for 4 generations. She said the house seemed to breathe differently after they were born, settle in a way it hadn't before, as if something had moved in along with the twins. They were identical in every visible way. Same dark hair, same pale eyes, same narrow hands. But people who spent time around them noticed something that was harder to name. Marcy talked. Ellen almost never did. Not because she couldn't. Her teachers confirmed that when she chose to speak, her vocabulary was startling for her age. She simply preferred not to. She preferred to watch. Classmates remembered the feeling of being studied by her, of turning around in the lunch line or the hallway and finding Ellen's eyes on you with an expression that was not unfriendly, but was not entirely comfortable either. They were inseparable until the age of 14, when Marcy began making friends outside the house in the way teenagers do. She joined the school choir. She started spending weekend afternoons at the mall with girls from her class. Normal things. The kind of slow separation from family that parents expect and hope for. Donna Duvall later told investigators that during this period, Ellen began spending long hours alone in the attic, that she would go up there after school and not come down until dinner, that when Donna knocked and asked what she was doing up there, Ellen would say she was listening. Listening to what? Donna would ask. Just listening, Ellen would say. In September 1999, Marcy Duvall did not come home from a Friday night football game. She had told her mother she was going with a group of friends and would be back by 11. At 11:15, Donna called the parents of the other girls. None of the other girls had seen Marcy at the game. None of them had made plans with her. None of them knew where she was. The search lasted 9 days. The town of Defiance participated in the way small towns do when something goes wrong. Volunteers walked fields. Flyers were posted. The local news ran the story every evening. On the 8th day, a farmer found Marcy's jacket folded neatly on the bank of the Maumee River 4 miles outside town. No note. No footprints leading to the water. Just the jacket folded with a precision that the farmer said gave him a feeling he couldn't put into words, as if someone had taken a great deal of care with it, as if its placement had meant something. Marcy's body was recovered from the river 3 weeks later. The medical examiner ruled her death a drowning. There was no evidence of foul play, no signs of struggle, no defensive wounds. Nothing to suggest that anyone else had been involved. The official conclusion was that Marcy had gone to the river alone on a September night and drowned. Ellen did not attend the funeral. Donna found this incomprehensible. She went to Ellen's room and knocked and finally opened the door. Ellen was sitting on her bed, looking at the window. Not out the window, at it, as if the glass itself was what she was watching. "She isn't in that box," Ellen said without turning around. "What do you mean?" Donna asked. "She isn't there," Ellen said. "She's still here." Donna assumed grief, assumed shock. She left Ellen alone and went through the terrible days that follow loss. But in the weeks after the funeral, things began happening in the house that Donna could not explain and eventually could not stay inside. Small things at first. The sense of being watched in rooms she was certain were empty. Her name spoken in a voice almost exactly like Marcy's coming from the hallway when Ellen was nowhere near. Food going bad in ways that had no explanation. A smell in the attic like river water that she could never locate the source of. Then one night, Donna woke at 2 a.m. to find Ellen standing in the bedroom doorway, just standing there in the dark. And in the second before she reached for the lamp, Donna had the distinct and overwhelming impression that she was not looking at one person in the doorway. That there was a depth to the shadow behind Ellen that should not have been there. That something was standing just behind her daughter. Something that leaned slightly forward to look around Ellen's shoulder at the woman in the bed. She turned on the lamp, and there was only Ellen. Donna Duvall moved out of the house within 2 weeks. She rented a room above the hardware store on Clinton Street and refused to go back. She gave Ellen money for food and checked in by phone. Ellen stayed in the house alone. Neighbors reported seeing a light in the attic window at all hours. A woman who walked her dog past the house every morning told people she sometimes heard 2 voices from inside. 2 voices having a conversation in a low murmur she couldn't make out. She had heard Marcy's voice before she died, and she knew what it sounded like. She said both voices sounded like Marcy's. Ellen lived in the house alone for 4 more years. She spoke to almost no one. She bought groceries at the gas station 2 blocks away and paid with exact change and did not make eye contact. Children dared each other to knock on her door. None of them ever did. In 2003, Donna Duvall received a call from the Defiance Police Department. They told her that a neighbor had not seen movement in the house for 11 days and had finally called it in. Officers found the house empty. Ellen was gone. No luggage missing, no car missing. Her shoes were by the front door. Her coat was on its hook. Her wallet was on the kitchen table with her ID and $63 still inside. No note, no forwarding address, no indication that she had planned to leave. The attic had been cleared of everything except a single item. A photograph of Marcy and Ellen at around age 10, smiling at the camera with their arms around each other, was propped against the wall in the center of the attic floor. Someone had drawn a line down the middle of it in black ink, dividing the 2 sisters cleanly down the center, one on each side of the line. The house has been empty since 2003. Donna Duvall died in 2011 and left it to a cousin who has never set foot inside it and has declined every offer to sell. The utilities are still paid. The lights still work. Neighbors who have lived next door for years will tell you that sometimes, on nights when it's very quiet, you can hear something in the attic. Not footsteps exactly, more like pacing, back and forth across the same small section of floor, back and forth, until just before dawn, and then nothing. The house on the east side of Defiance sits exactly as it always has, waiting. The way it has always waited, the way it learned to wait back in the winter of 1971 when a blizzard rolled in and something arrived with the twins. Whatever it was, it hasn't left. There is exactly one case in American legal history where the testimony of a ghost was accepted as evidence in a murder trial. One case where a court of law in the United States looked at what a dead woman had told the living and decided it was admissible. That case happened in Greenbrier County, West Virginia in 1897, and the woman whose ghost spoke was named Zona Heaster Shue. Zona was a young woman in her 20s when she met Edward Shue in the summer of 1896. He had come to Greenbrier County from out of state, a blacksmith looking for work. He was charming and attentive in a way that moved quickly. They met in the fall. By the end of the year, they were married. Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, did not like Edward Shue from the first time she met him. She could not explain it fully. It was the kind of feeling that lives below the level of language. Something about the way he looked at her daughter. Something about the way he controlled the space around Zona when they were together. Mary Jane prayed over the marriage and kept her concerns to herself and hoped she was wrong. She was not wrong. In January 1897, less than 3 months after the wedding, a young boy who had been sent to the Shue home on an errand found Zona's body at the bottom of the stairs. She was lying on her back with her feet together and her arms at her sides, and her head tilted to one side in a way that the boy who found her said did not look like someone who had fallen. It looked like someone who had been placed. He ran for the doctor. The local physician, Dr. George Knapp, arrived and began examining the body. Edward Shue had already dressed Zona in her best clothes and wrapped a high-necked dress around her throat and a scarf around her neck. He was holding her head in his hands when the doctor arrived, cradling it and weeping, and he continued to hold it throughout the examination, becoming agitated whenever the doctor attempted to examine the neck area. The examination was brief. Dr. Knapp noted slight discoloration on the neck, but did not pursue it. The cause of death was recorded as everlasting faint, a phrase that meant nothing medically and was essentially an acknowledgement that the doctor had not determined a cause. Zona was buried. Edward Shue grieved publicly and dramatically. He placed a pillow on one side of her head in the coffin and a rolled cloth on the other side. And when people at the wake commented on it, he said she had loved those things and would need them for her journey. He stood over the open coffin and did not allow people to view her face for long. When relatives tried to spend time near her body, he interposed himself. He was the grief-stricken husband, and his grief became a wall between everyone else and the woman in the coffin. Mary Jane Heaster went home from her daughter's funeral and prayed. She prayed every night for 4 weeks. She prayed for God to show her the truth about what had happened to Zona. She was not a woman who expected visions. She was a practical woman from a practical part of the country who had a feeling that would not leave her and a prayer that she said every night because she had nothing else. On the 4th week, Zona came to her. She appeared at the foot of Mary Jane's bed for 4 consecutive nights. She was clear and present in the way that Mary Jane would later describe not as a dream, but as something that occupied the same space as the room around her. On each night, she told her mother more of what had happened. She told her that Edward had become enraged at her for what she had prepared for supper, that he had attacked her, that he had broken her neck. On the last night, she turned her head completely around to show her mother what had been done to it, rotating it in a way that was not possible in life, to demonstrate the injury that had killed her. Mary Jane Heaster went to the prosecutor. John Alfred Preston listened to her. He was skeptical in the way that any prosecutor would be skeptical of a woman telling him that a ghost had identified its own murderer. But something about Mary Jane Heaster's account compelled him. Her consistency. her lack of embellishment, the specificity of what she described. He ordered the body exhumed. The examination found exactly what Zona's ghost had told her mother. The neck had been broken, the ligaments were torn, the windpipe had been crushed. Zona Heister's shoe had not fainted. She had been murdered. The cause of death was strangulation and a broken neck. Edward Shue was arrested and charged with murder. At trial, his defense attorney attempted to discredit Mary Jane Heister by getting her to admit that she had imagined the visitations, that they were dreams, that she was a grieving mother whose mind had constructed a story she needed to believe. Mary Jane did not waver. She maintained under cross-examination that what she had experienced was real, that Zona had come to her, that Zona had told her the truth. The jury deliberated for a little over an hour. They convicted Edward Shue of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison and died there in 1900. The court records of Greenbrier County, West Virginia still document the trial of Edward Shue. They still record the testimony of Mary Jane Heister. They still represent the only instance in American legal history where a ghost's testimony was entered into court proceedings and where the defendant was convicted of the crime that ghost described. Zona Heister Shue is buried in Greenbrier County. Her grave marker was replaced in 1979, and the new one acknowledges what she did. It reads that she is the Greenbrier ghost whose testimony from beyond the grave helped convict her killer. She told her mother what happened to her. Her mother went to the prosecutor. The prosecutor dug up the truth, and a court of law in West Virginia decided that what a dead woman told her grieving mother in the night was worth listening to. It was. It was worth everything. There are mountains in America that have been taking people for as long as people have been going into them. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park, on the border of Tennessee and North Carolina, is the most visited national park in the United States. Millions of people walk its trails every year. Most of them come back. The ones who do not are rarely forgotten because the mountains do not give up what they take, and the families left behind have no choice but to keep asking why. Dennis Martin was 6 years old on June 14, 1969. He was in the Smokies with his father William, his grandfather, and his older brother Douglas for a Father's Day camping trip. They were on Spence Field, an open grassy meadow about 5 miles from the nearest trailhead at Cades Cove. It was late afternoon. The light was good. The weather was clear. The family was relaxed in the way families are when they are somewhere beautiful and safe and together. The boys had been playing a game. They had split into 2 groups and planned to sneak up on their fathers from different directions and surprise them. It was the kind of game that 6-year-olds play everywhere. Dennis was with one group, his brother with another. They disappeared into the tree line at the edge of the meadow to circle around. Douglas emerged from the woods on his side of the meadow as planned. Dennis did not emerge. At first it was not alarming. A child hiding. A child who had gone a little further into the trees than intended. William Martin called out. He walked to the tree line. He called again. He went in a short distance and found nothing, and came back out and called again, and the feeling that had not been alarming became something else entirely in the space of a few minutes. By nightfall, Dennis Martin had not appeared, and a full search had begun. The National Park Service was notified. Searchers went into the woods at the edge of Spence Field. They found no trace. The night was cold for June in the mountains, and Dennis was wearing a red shirt and had no supplies. He was 6 years old, and he was somewhere in one of the densest, and most rugged wilderness areas on the east coast of the United States. What followed was the largest search and rescue operation in the history of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. At its peak, more than 1,400 people were involved. The military sent personnel. The Army's Special Forces unit from Fort Bragg was deployed because the terrain was considered too difficult for standard searchers. Green Berets moved through the mountain undergrowth, looking for a 6-year-old boy in a red shirt. President Nixon was briefed on the search. It was that large and that serious, and that completely without result. But there was something else. Something that happened on the same day Dennis Martin disappeared, that was not connected to the search until later, and that has never been fully explained. A family named Key was picnicking in the Smokies that same afternoon, about a mile from Spence Field. Harold Key and his family heard a sound from the direction of a nearby trail that he described as a loud, frightened scream followed by silence. He looked up and saw a figure moving through the brush, carrying something large. He assumed it was a bear. He noted it and moved on. It was only later, when he heard about the search for Dennis Martin, that he connected what he had seen to the missing child. He went to the authorities. He told his story. Investigators did not dismiss it. The timing matched. The location was within the range of where Dennis could have been. The figure Harold Key described was large. It was moving quickly. It was carrying something that from a distance he had assumed was a dead animal, but that he acknowledged he could not identify with certainty. No explanation for what Harold Key saw has ever been confirmed. Dennis Martin was never found. Not a shoe, not a piece of clothing, not a single physical trace of a 6-year-old child in a red shirt in a wilderness area that 1,400 people searched for weeks. The Green Berets who covered that terrain came back with nothing. The dogs who were brought in found nothing. The creek beds were searched. The hollows were searched. The ridge lines were walked over and over. His father, William Martin, spent years driving to the Smokies on weekends and walking the trails alone. He told reporters that he could not stop looking, that stopping would mean accepting something he was not prepared to accept. He continued searching long after any realistic hope of finding Dennis alive had passed. Long after the Park Service had moved on. Long after the story had left the newspapers. He walked those trails until he was too old to walk them anymore. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is still the most visited national park in the United States. Millions of people walk its trails every year. They walk the same meadow at Spence Field, where Dennis Martin played his last game on a clear June afternoon. They step into the same tree line. They come back out. Dennis Martin stepped in and did not come back out. The mountains have never explained why. The thing Harold Key saw moving through the brush has never been identified. The scream he heard has never been attributed to any source that investigators could verify. The boy in the red shirt has been missing for more than 50 years. The park keeps his file. His family kept his memory. And the tree line at the edge of Spence Field looks exactly as it did on the afternoon of June 14th, 1969, when a 6-year-old boy walked into it to play a game and the mountain decided to keep him.